Well, after a intriguing week one, where the hype, around certain people, didn't materialize and things kind of went south in other ways for some other teams, week one was intriguing. Week two, maybe not so much on paper, but we're going to get to that in a moment. We're going to get to week two in a moment. Let's talk week one first. Where do I even begin? Jackson Arnold? I'm actually shocked this man, was able to, put on an Auburn Tigers uniform and basically beat Baylor the way he did. Baylor, I don't know what's wrong with this team. They've been up and down over the past few years, and this is going to be another down season if they don't fix some things on the defensive side of the ball. Because, Jackson Arnold was running all over you guys. Pretty bad. Same thing could be said for Boise State. Mano Madsen, he did his best, but ultimately that USF, team was just entirely too much. Like, whoa, did you expect that? I mean, to be fair, this game was played at 4:30 Central Time on a Thursday, Just FYI, 4:30 on a Thursday, Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? I don't know what we're doing. I'll tell you what, USF, proved us wrong. Proved us a little bit wrong. We all thought, hey, Byron Brown, he's still there, and everything like that. South Florida's still not, they're okay, but and nothing special. But no, that Bulls team beat the brakes off Boise State. Now the G5 race is just completely wide open. Like, I don't even know who is going to be the G5 rep now. There has to be a G5 rep. There has to be. So, I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out over the course of the season who emerges. Boise State still could, wind up going all the way. But, I mean, again, does that really mean anything if they got whipped like this in week one? Let's talk a couple other teams real quick that were also kind of, weird. Kansas State, again, I told you, them Dakota teams are not to be played with. North Dakota almost got the win against Kansas State, but ultimately, the Wildcats were able to pull off some nonsense at the end. They are unranked, though, now after losing in Ireland. And this game right here, just, not a good indicator of a healthy team. The way this defense was getting dogged, by North Dakota, which, don't get me wrong. This may be a playoff team in the FCS, but who knows? I know a team that, is foaming at the mouth right now. And that's my friends, the Army Black Knights. I know a certain friend of mine, is absolutely seething that Army lost to Tarleton, like this. And don't get me wrong, Tarleton's not even an FCS team, to be quite honest with you. This is a team that's ready to go up to FBS, So, I mean, this isn't surprising at all. They beat the brakes off of Portland State. They win again against Army in overtime. They were efficient. They did what they needed to do. Army, couldn't back the Texans into a corner. And, I mean, yeah, it is what it is. South Carolina, looked kind of sluggish. It looked kind of sluggish, to be quite honest with you, against Virginia Tech. But, Virginia Tech, couldn't muster up enough offense with Kyron Drones because it's Kyron Drones. Let's just keep it real. A Virginia Tech team ain't doing nothing with that guy at quarterback. Don't get me wrong. He's all right. But, when Lenore Sells is able to make the connections needed, they were able to make the connections needed. And, I mean, 24-11 doesn't really scream a lot. But, again, that defense of the Gamecocks held Drones back. I mean, he only completed 15 passes out of 35 in that game. So the other game on Sunday, the Miami Hurricanes, although CJ Kane, was the starter for Notre Dame, CJ Carr, not CJ Kane, CJ Carr. I'm getting my people mixed up now. CJ Carr, who did pretty decent in his debut as a Notre Dame quarterback. Carson Beck was also pretty efficient. There were some plays in this game between both teams where it was like, what are we doing here? Carson Beck was able to make the plays needed. Notre Dame made a dumb play at the end of this game of just tackling a guy, trying to not give up a deep ball from Beck. Miami still, doesn't really, I don't know. This is a tough game. Can Miami keep the momentum up? Can Notre Dame, rally behind the freshmen, to continue their momentum? Are both of these teams going to be playoff teams come December? We'll find out, but this is a pretty good game. One of the better games of the weekend. I can't really say the same of LSU, Clemson. It was a rough game, LSU was able to get a touchdown late, make the plays needed. They were hovering. Over Cade Klubnik, Again, a Clemson offense that was held to only 31 rushing yards, 261 yards in total. Just not a recipe for success. Only 13 first downs, not a lot. Just not a lot from Clemson. That offense looked anemic out there, and they could not get anything done against the LSU defense. Again, LSU was able to do just enough to make a statement win early on. Let's talk Alabama real quick. I don't know what's wrong with this team. Caleb DeBoer, Ty Simpson, it's not looking good. When you have a guy like Thomas Castellanos, who was at BC last year, talking the smack the way he did and backing it up to with the Bama offense really not getting anything going, the Bama defense getting ran over, not just by Castellanos, but by the bevy of backs in the backfield, by the Seminoles. It's not a recipe for success. When you're getting beat on both sides of the ball, it's just not fun. It's just not fun. Yeah, Alabama has UL Monroe this week, but honestly, this looks pathetic. And again, Florida State was basically just all over Alabama for most of that game. And it's like, gotta do something, man. You gotta do something. And Bama just didn't do anything, that could be warranted, And it's just like, wow, whatever, Can Alabama still make the playoffs? Maybe. Again, a lot of these teams are going to be talking playoffs at this point. It's early, but hey, these are the games that define you early before conference play, because a lot of the last couple of weeks of September, a lot of duds. And again, this week is no exception. This week when we come into college football this week, for week 2, there's no exceptions here. But there are some exceptions, again, about that hype that I was talking about early on to start. And, Arch Manning, I mean, he looked better to Julian Sayin a little bit, not much. Honestly, it was all Ohio State's defense. I told you guys that these two defenses were legitimate, like 2 of the best in the country. Unfortunately, Texas's offense just could not get anything going until it was too late yet again. It is what it is. But hey, if Ryan Day can't call a good game, Sark can definitely not call a good game. Because, I don't know what this was. Short passes that aren't getting completed, simple passes too. Seems like right there. Can you get it to him, Arch? No. What about now? Late in the fourth quarter, you're down 14-0. Okay, now you can do that. Now you can do something. Good job, Arch. but too little too late. You know what I'm saying? Too little too late. Ohio State, again, elite defense. I said this all year long, already. The first couple weeks that I've been talking college football, I said it. This defense is legitimate, and they proved it by having multiple goal line stands against Texas. And it was the same stuff as it was in the semifinal, just multiple plays that were key down the stretch, and Ohio State beats Texas yet again. So the other thing that got hyped up by ESPN, because a lot of people were hyping up Arch as the Heisman Trophy, which I don't even know who's going to win the Heisman Trophy this year. That's why I didn't make any predictions on it, because I don't know. I really don't. I really don't think this is a year where it's like, oh, okay, this is a Heisman Trophy winner. I just don't. I don't really see it this year, And the way the award has been, where it's just like I don't particularly care like that. The other again, let's just go back into the other big hype, which is like ESPN had guys on site and everything like that. This is a Labor Day game. This was the Monday night game. It was Bill Belichick coming to college coaching, and Gio Lopez, he transferred over to North Carolina, I think, and did not do anything. He didn't complete a pass for 2 hours. He got hurt, thus allowing North Carolina's quarterback from last year, Max Johnson, to come in. Bill Belichick, looked like Bill Belichick on the sideline, like always unimpressed. He's kind of like Saban in that regard, where he just always looks unimpressed on the sidelines. And even though, Josh Hoover is probably okay, maybe he's not a hurry, but we're gonna keep rolling with the meme that he is. I forgot TCU brought this guy back, and he played pretty efficient last year, and he played very good in this game. And that TCU defense smoked Gio Lopez and the Tar Heels. I'm talking again. Lopez did not complete a pass for 2 hours. 2 hours. Not just game time. I'm talking 2 hours in general. 2 hours in general. So, North Carolina just looked awful out there. All this hype, all this pregame fanfare just for falling flat on your face. It's absolutely hilarious, I'm a little sad about my horns, but at least, it was, like, oh, it's just like the Horns have 3 cupcakes coming up and they'll be 3-1 probably going into SEC play. Like, this is just bad. Like, TCU beat the brakes off of North Carolina. It wasn't even close. After that first touchdown, all the momentum died. So, it is what it is. What about this week? Let's talk this week. Bryce Underwood, man, of the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan didn't look entirely impressive against New Mexico, but, they still beat New Mexico. This is New Mexico, John Mateer. John Mateer is at Oklahoma now. Yeah, Illinois State is not the needle mover, but honestly, this is the biggest game of the week. This is the only top 25 matchup this week. This is the only game that really completely matters in the playoff race. Like we're talking, you lose this game, you are already on. You're knocking on death's door. You're knocking on death's door. So just FYI. This is a big game, 2 guys that are kind of unproven in a way. Mateer, last year, he was dazzling, I think he played at Washington State last year. It was either Washington State. No, I think it was Washington State last year. He dazzled, but, again, that was last year. It's a new year. In Oklahoma, a lot of people question them being, even ranked to start the season, but there's still a little bit of hype around them. To do something after last year. And Brett Venables is going to have to get this team, ready. Again, Tron Moore and company, I don't even know who's coaching, to be quite honest. I don't even know who's coaching the Michigan team, to be quite honest, for this game. Don't. don't particularly care who's coaching. Michigan, they already gave up 17 to New Mexico. And again, that's not to say there's anything wrong with that. It's just like you gave up 17 to New Mexico. So just FYI. There are some other games this week again, not too much, too crazy. Again, a lot of teams are still playing, the basically the less, they're cutting off the fat before they get to the real meat of the schedule. So teams like Texas, they're playing San Jose State, Indiana, playing Kennesaw State, Texas Tech, ranked at 24 now, playing Kent State. So a lot of these games, just like, no, don't want to watch that. Like East Texas A&M, formerly Texas A&M Commerce, I believe. They're playing Florida State. Penn State playing FIU because, that's a matchup that has to happen. But at least we got the Cyhawk game. Iowa's, not looking great. They did look good last week. Like the guy that they have at quarterback, I think he only threw for like 51 yards. Not good. Iowa State, it's 2-0. They took care of business, last week in one of their tune-up games, and now this is a big one for them. The Cyhawk game is always a big one. Big-time rivalry. It's going to be, probably one of the main games. If you have a game on, it's going to be this one. Illinois Duke is also a game that's going to be on in that same window. Same thing with Baylor SMU. I'd keep an eye on both of those. Again, not too much, in the afternoon. You can stay and watch, good old Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy, because Mike Gundy said some stuff, to Dan Lanning, and now they're having a little pissing contest between each other. So, but hey, Dante Moore is playing, so just keep that in mind. Oregon was able to take care of business easily this past weekend. And, how about those Ole Miss Rebels? They're ranked 20th in the nation. That's cool. Let's see. Austin Simmons is the guy for Ole Miss. I don't even know who Kentucky's quarterback is, to be quite honest with you. Kentucky, they beat Toledo, and it actually was closer than it should have been. And guess who's the quarterback for Kentucky? Zach Calzada. Oh my God! Never mind. I mean, if you want to watch those two games, you can. I'd also say USF Florida is a game to keep an eye on now, because Florida is going through the schedule that is, hell. Like, the schedule is just not kind to anybody. They're going to go through it. Probably the toughest schedule in the nation. So if you want to watch that, it's also in that afternoon window. But everything else basically is cupcake games, aside from the aforementioned Michigan, Oklahoma. So just FYI, if you're, not doing anything on Saturday, basically I'm going to work on Saturday. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go to work on Saturday and, come back and watch the Michigan-Oklahoma game, and then settle in for NFL and college volleyball on Sunday, and some NWSL too. But, yeah, that's basically it from me. I'm going to get on up out of here, get out y'all's hair. I'm going to make the NFL video like right after this, because I do have some business to attend to tomorrow. So I'll probably get back home like super late tomorrow. So I'm trying to figure out how to attend to this business, and then get back home late. Probably like, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, that's it from me. What are you expecting week number 2 of college football? Again, there could be some upsets, to be quite honest with you. Watch out for USF Florida. I do think Florida, it's like, they're not going to make it through the gauntlet. And that could start immediately with this game against USF. But what do you guys think? Make sure you're watching, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. We're almost to 400 too. So need to kind of get to that.